Hello, my dear English learners. Welcome back to Native Flow English. I'm Sarah.
And every day here we share stories and lessons to help you improve your English naturally. Today we will learn English through some everyday stories that you can relate to and use in your EI. Daily conversations. Let's get started. Last week my friend Mark called me. He sounded excited because he had a small problem that turned into a funny story. Mark said, "Natasha, I tried cooking dinner for my wife, Sarah, but I made a big mistake." I asked, "What happened?" He explained, "I wanted to make spaghetti, but I accidentally put salt instead of sugar in the sauce." Mark laughed and said, "Sarah took one bite and made a funny face. She said it tasted like the ocean." I told him, "That happens to everyone sometimes. Cooking mistakes are part of learning." He replied, "Yes, but Sarah still appreciated the effort." We ended up ordering pizza, and it was a great night. From this story, you can learn how to talk about mistakes and experiences. For example, I made a big mistake. I accidentally did something, and we ended up doing something else. These phrases are useful in many situations. Another story comes from my neighbor, John. He recently bought a new phone. John told me, "I was so excited to use my new phone, but I didn't know how to set it up. The instructions were confusing." I asked, "Did you get help?" John said, "Yes, I asked my wife, Emily. She showed me step by step how to use the phone." John explained, "Now I use it every day without problems. The key is to ask for help when you don't understand something." This teaches us phrases like, "I didn't know how to," and "I asked for help." It's okay not to know everything at first. Asking for help is a good skill. Let me share a quick example from my own life. Last weekend, I decided to clean the house. I told my husband, David, "Today I will clean the living room and kitchen." David smiled and said, "Thank you. I will take care of the garden." While cleaning, I found some old photos. I said, "Look at this picture. It brings back good memories." David replied, "Yes, it reminds me of when we first met." This moment was special, and it helped us remember the past. Here, you see how to talk about plans with "I will" and share feelings with phrases like, "It brings back memories." Talking about the past and the future is important in daily conversations. One more story comes from my friend Anna. She was learning to drive a car. At first, she was nervous. Anna told me, "I was afraid I might make a mistake on the road." I said, "That's normal. Everyone feels nervous in the beginning." She said, "After a few lessons, I felt more confident. Now I can drive safely." Anna's story teaches us to express feelings with "I was afraid" and to show progress with "I felt more confident." You can use these phrases to talk about your feelings and experiences too. A few days ago, my friend James told me about a situation at work. He said, "I had a presentation yesterday and I was a bit nervous." I asked, "How did it go?" He answered, "At first I forgot one of my main points, but then I remembered and continued smoothly." James explained, "I used the phrase, 'Let me get back to that,' when I wanted to return to the point I missed." This story teaches us useful expressions like I was nervous, I forgot something, and let me get back to that. These phrases are common when talking about presentations or public speaking. If you ever forget what you want to say, it is okay to pause and then return to your idea. Another story is about my cousin Laura. She recently moved to a new city. Laura told me, "At first, I felt lonely because I didn't know anyone." I said, "How did you make new friends?" She replied, "I joined a local sports club, and I met people there. We played tennis and talked after the games." Laura said, "Joining activities helped me feel part of the community." This story shows how to talk about feelings like loneliness and how to explain actions you take to solve problems. You can say, "I felt lonely," "I joined a club," or "I met new people." Talking about emotions and actions together makes your story interesting. Let me tell you about a situation my neighbor Peter experienced. Peter needed to fix his car, but he didn't know much about cars. He said, "I called a mechanic, but I also watched videos online to understand the problem." I asked, "Did you fix it yourself?" Peter smiled and said, "No, but watching the videos helped me ask better questions when I spoke to the mechanic." From Peter's experience, you can learn how to explain preparation and asking for help. For example, I watched videos to learn, I didn't fix it myself, and I asked the mechanic questions. These phrases are useful when you want to explain how you solve problems step by step. My friend Emily shared a story about learning to cook a new dish. She said, "I followed the recipe carefully, but I added too much chili by mistake." Emily laughed and said, "The food was very spicy, and my husband had to drink a lot of water." She explained, "Now I measure spices more carefully." This example helps you talk about mistakes and lessons learned. You can say, "I made a mistake, it was too spicy," or "I learned to be more careful." Sharing these experiences makes your English more natural and relatable. One morning, my colleague David had a problem with his computer. He told me, "The screen went black and I didn't know what to do." I asked, "Did you fix it?" David said, "I restarted the computer and it worked again. I learned that sometimes restarting solves simple problems." David's story is useful to practice explaining problems and solutions. Use phrases like, "I had a problem," "I didn't know what to do," and "restarting fixed it." These expressions help you describe everyday challenges and how you overcome them. Let's hear about Sarah, who recently started a new job. She said, "The first week was hard because I had to learn many new tasks." Sarah added, "I wrote notes during training and asked questions when I didn't understand." She said, "My manager was helpful and encouraged me." From Sarah's experience, you can learn to talk about challenges and support. Say, "The first week was hard. I wrote notes, I asked questions, and my manager was helpful." These sentences show how to describe difficult situations and the ways you manage them. My friend Michael shared a story about traveling by train. He said, "I bought a ticket online, but I forgot to check the time." Michael continued, "I arrived late at the station and missed the train." He laughed and said, "I learned to always check the schedule carefully." Michael's story teaches useful phrases for travel. You can say, "I bought a ticket," "I forgot to check the time," I arrived late, and I missed the train. These expressions help when talking about travel plans and mistakes. Last weekend, my sister Olivia helped her son with homework. She said, "He didn't understand the math problem, so I explained it step by step." Olivia added, "After practicing, he solved similar problems by himself." She said, "Patience is important when teaching." Olivia's example helps with phrases related to teaching and learning. Use, "He didn't understand." "I explained." "He practiced." And "patience is important." These sentences are useful when talking about helping others. My friend Kevin told me about a day when he went shopping. He said, "I went to the market to buy fruits. I asked the seller for the price of apples and oranges." Kevin continued, "He gave me a good price and I bought fresh fruits." He said, "Asking questions helped me get the right information." Kevin's story shows how to use English in shopping situations. You can say, "I asked for the price," "I bought fresh fruits," and "asking questions helped me." These phrases are useful when you want to buy something and communicate clearly. Finally, my neighbor Anna shared how she spends her free time. She said, "I enjoy reading books and listening to music." Anna explained, "Reading helps me learn new words, and music improves my listening skills." She added, "I try to practice English every day." Anna's story is useful for talking about hobbies and learning. Use expressions like, "I enjoy," "Reading helps me," "Music improves my skills," and "I practice every day." Talking about hobbies is a great way to make your conversations more interesting. My friend Daniel recently faced an unexpected situation while shopping. He said, "I went to the supermarket to buy some vegetables for dinner." Daniel continued, "When I got to the checkout, I realized I forgot my wallet at home." He explained, "I felt embarrassed, but I told the cashier honestly." The cashier was very kind and said, "It happens to everyone. You can pay next time." Daniel said, "I promise to come back tomorrow with the money." This story shows how to express feelings like embarrassment and honesty. You can say, "I realized I forgot something." "I felt embarrassed," and "I promised to come back." These phrases help in situations where you face small problems but solve them politely. A few weeks ago, my colleague Rachel shared an experience about learning English. She said, "At first I found it difficult to understand fast speakers." Rachel added, "To improve, I started watching English movies with subtitles." She explained, "This helped me hear how words sound and understand context." Rachel said, "Now, I can follow conversations better and feel more confident." Rachel's story teaches how to talk about learning strategies. You can use sentences like, "I found it difficult," "I started watching," and "it helped me." When you explain how you learn something, these expressions are very useful. My brother Michael told me about a funny moment when he was fixing his bike. He said, "I tried to repair the chain, but I used the wrong tool." Michael laughed and said, "I realized my mistake when the chain fell off again." He added, "Then I watched a tutorial video and learned the right way." Michael explained, After that, the bike worked perfectly. This example shows how to describe actions and mistakes clearly. Use full sentences like I tried to repair, I realized my mistake, and I watched a tutorial. Talking about problems and solutions helps you explain your experiences well. Last month, my neighbor Lisa shared a story about a surprise party. She said, "We planned a birthday party for my husband, Mark." Lisa explained, "I invited his friends and family secretly." She said, "When Mark arrived, he was very surprised and happy." Lisa added, "We enjoyed food, music, and games together." Lisa's story helps with vocabulary about celebrations. You can say, "We planned a party," "I invited friends secretly," and "he was surprised." These phrases are good for describing events and emotions clearly. My friend Andrew talked about a time when he lost his phone. He said, "I couldn't find my phone anywhere at home." Andrew explained, "I searched in every room, but it was missing." He said, "I remembered I used it in the car, so I checked there." Andrew smiled and said, "Luckily, it was on the car seat." This story teaches how to talk about searching for something. You can say, "I couldn't find," "I searched everywhere," and "luckily I found it." These expressions are useful for everyday conversations about lost items. A few days ago, my Aunt Clara told me about her visit to the doctor. She said, "I wasn't feeling well, so I made an appointment." Clara explained, "The doctor examined me and asked about my symptoms." She added, "I told him I had a headache and a cough." Clara said, "The doctor gave me medicine and told me to rest." This example shows how to talk about health and visits to the doctor. Use full sentences like, "I wasn't feeling well. The doctor examined me and he gave me medicine." These phrases help you describe health, problems, and advice clearly. My friend James shared a story about learning a new skill. He said, "I decided to learn how to play the guitar." James explained, "At first it was difficult to hold the strings correctly." He added, "I practiced every day for 1 hour." James said, "Now I can play simple songs and I am very proud." James's story teaches how to express goals and progress. You can say, "I decided to learn. It was difficult at first, and I practiced every day." These sentences are great for talking about new hobbies and achievements. My colleague Emma told me about her experience with public transportation. She said, "I usually take the bus to work." Emma explained, "One day the bus was late and I was worried about being late for a meeting." She said, "I called my office and told them I would arrive late." Emma added, "Finally the bus arrived, and I made it just in time." Emma's story helps with talking about time and transportation. You can use phrases like, "I usually take," "The bus was late," "I was worried," and "I called to explain." These expressions help you communicate about daily routines and problems. Let me share a story from my friend Olivia, who enjoys gardening. She said, "I planted flowers in my garden last spring." Olivia explained, "At first, some plants did not grow well because I didn't water them enough." She said, "After learning more about gardening, I changed my watering schedule." Olivia added, "Now my garden looks beautiful and healthy." This example shows how to describe cause and effect. You can say, some plants did not grow well, I didn't water enough, and I changed my schedule. These sentences help explain problems and improvements clearly. My neighbor Thomas shared a story about his weekend hiking trip. He said, I went hiking in the mountains with friends. Thomas explained, the trail was difficult, but the views were amazing. He added, we stopped for lunch near a small lake. Thomas said, it was a great day to enjoy nature and exercise. Thomas's story teaches useful vocabulary about outdoor activities. You can say, I went hiking, the trail was difficult, we stopped for lunch, and it was a great day. These expressions are perfect for talking about trips and leisure activities. Now try to think about your own stories using some of these ideas. You can talk about a time you lost something, learned a new skill, or faced a problem and solved it. Use complete sentences to describe your experiences clearly. Practicing storytelling will help you speak English more naturally and confidently. A few weeks ago, my friend Steven told me about a surprising experience he had at the bank. He said, I went to the bank to open a new account. Steven continued, when I arrived, the bank was very busy and I had to wait for a long time. He added, while waiting, I started talking with the person next to me. Steven said, we shared stories about our jobs and hobbies. He explained, it was a nice way to pass the time, and I made a new friend. From Steven's story, you can learn how to talk about waiting and starting conversations. You might say, I had to wait for a long time. I started talking to someone, or we shared stories. These phrases are useful when describing everyday social situations. Last month, my cousin Hannah shared a story about her first experience cooking a traditional meal. She said, I wanted to surprise my family by making a special dinner. Hannah explained, I found a recipe online and bought all the ingredients. She said, the cooking was harder than I expected. Hannah continued, at one point, I burned the sauce and the kitchen smelled smoky. She laughed and said, but I didn't give up. I cleaned the pan and started again. Finally, Hannah said, the meal turned out delicious, and my family was very happy. Hannah's story teaches you how to describe plans, challenges, and success. You can say, I wanted to surprise. It was harder than I expected. I burned the sauce, and I didn't give up. These phrases help you tell stories about effort and achievement. My friend Oliver shared a story about an important meeting at work. He said, I prepared a report for my team. Oliver explained, during the meeting, I presented the report and answered questions. He said, some questions were difficult, but I stayed calm and focused. Oliver added, after the meeting, my manager thanked me for the clear presentation. This story helps you talk about work and professional situations. Use sentences like, I prepared a report, I answered questions, I stayed calm, and my manager thanked me. These expressions show how to describe work-related experiences clearly and confidently. A few days ago, my neighbor Sophia told me about her experience learning to swim. She said, "I was afraid of the water." At first, Sophia explained, my instructor helped me practice breathing and floating. She said, after several lessons, I felt more comfortable. Sophia smiled and said, now I can swim across the pool. Sophia's story teaches how to describe fears and progress. You can say, I was afraid. My instructor helped. Me, I practiced. And now I can. These phrases are useful when talking about learning new skills and overcoming challenges. My friend Kevin told me about a day when he lost his wallet. He said, I realized my wallet was missing after I left the cafe. Kevin explained, I went back to the cafe, but it wasn't there. He said, I called the police and reported the loss. Kevin added, luckily someone found it and returned it to the police station. This story shows how to talk about problems and solutions. Use full sentences like, I realized it was missing. I went back. I called the police, and someone returned it. These expressions help you describe unexpected situations clearly. My colleague Laura shared her experience with a new hobby. She said, I started painting last year. Laura explained, at first I didn't know which colors to use. She added, I watched online tutorials and practiced every weekend. Laura said, now I enjoy painting landscapes and sharing my work with friends. This story is useful for discussing hobbies and learning. You can say, I started, I didn't know, I watched tutorials, and I enjoy. These phrases help you talk about interests and improvements in skills. A few weeks ago, my neighbor Tom told me about a family trip. He said, we went to the countryside for the weekend. Tom explained, the weather was perfect for hiking. He said, we walked on trails, saw beautiful views, and took many photos. Tom added, in the evening, we cooked dinner together and shared stories. Tom's story teaches how to talk about trips and family activities. You can use sentences like, we went to the countryside. The weather was perfect. We walked on trails, and we shared stories. These expressions help you describe enjoyable experiences. My friend Anna shared a story about a surprise gift she received. She said, I didn't expect anything for my birthday. Anna explained, my husband gave me a beautiful book. She said, it was exactly what I wanted. Anna added, I felt very happy and thankful. This story helps you express feelings of surprise and gratitude. Use full sentences like, I didn't expect anything. He gave me. It was exactly what I wanted, and I felt thankful. These phrases are useful for talking about gifts and emotions. Let me tell you about a time when my friend Jason helped his neighbor. He said, the neighbor's car broke down and he couldn't get to work. Jason explained, I offered to give him a ride. He said, we talked during the trip and I learned a lot about his job. Jason added, helping others is important. Jason's story teaches useful phrases about helping and socializing. You can say, the car broke down, I offered to help, we talked during the trip, and helping others is important. These sentences help you describe kind actions and conversations. My colleague Michelle shared a story about a mistake she made at work. She said, I sent an email to the wrong person. Michelle explained, I quickly apologized and corrected the mistake. She said, everyone understood, and there was no problem. Michelle added, I learned to double-check emails before sending. This story helps you talk about mistakes and lessons. Use full sentences like, I sent an email, I apologized, there was no problem, and I learned. These expressions are useful when explaining small errors and how you handle them. A few days ago, my friend Eric told me about a weekend project. He said, I decided to build a bookshelf. Eric explained, I bought wood and tools at the store. He said, I followed instructions carefully. Eric added, after a few hours, I had a new shelf for my books. Eric's story helps you talk about projects and achievements. Use sentences like, I decided to build, I bought materials, I followed instructions, and I completed the project. These phrases help describe tasks and results. My neighbor Rachel shared a story about a concert she attended. She said, I went to see a live band last Saturday. Rachel explained, the music was loud and exciting. She said, I danced with friends and enjoyed the night. Rachel added, it was a great way to relax after a busy week. Rachel's story teaches vocabulary related to entertainment and socializing. You can say, I went to see, the music was loud, I danced with friends, and it was a great way to relax. These expressions help describe fun experiences. My friend Paul told me about a time he volunteered. He said, I helped organize a charity event. Paul explained, I invited people to join and prepared materials. He said, the event was successful and we raised money for a good cause. Paul added, volunteering makes me feel happy. Paul's story helps you talk about volunteering and positive feelings. Use full sentences like, I helped organize, we raised money, and volunteering makes me feel happy. These phrases are useful for discussing community activities. A few weeks ago, my sister Emma shared a story about studying for exams. She said, I made a study schedule to prepare better. Emma explained, I studied in short sessions and took breaks. She said, on exam day, I felt calm and confident. Emma added, the schedule helped me manage my time. Emma's story helps you describe preparation and time management. Use sentences like, I made a schedule, I studied in sessions, I felt calm, and it helped me. These expressions are useful when talking about studying and organization. My friend David shared a story about buying a new computer. He said, I researched different models online. David explained, I compared prices and features before deciding. He said, I bought a computer that fits my needs and budget. David added, it works well for my work and hobbies. David's story teaches useful phrases about decision-making and shopping. You can say, I researched, I compared prices, I decided, and it fits my needs. These sentences help describe choices and purchases. Now it's your turn to think about similar experiences. You can talk about a time you helped someone, made a plan, or enjoyed a special moment. Use full sentences to describe what happened, how you felt, and what you learned. Practicing storytelling will improve your fluency and confidence in English. A few days ago, my colleague Ben told me about his experience trying to fix a broken door at home. Ben said, "The door wouldn't close properly, so I decided to repair it myself." He continued. "I watched a few videos online and bought some tools." Ben explained, "At first I was unsure what to do, but I followed the instructions carefully." He added, "After a couple of hours, I fixed the door and it works perfectly now." From Ben's story, you can learn phrases like the door wouldn't close. I decided to repair it. I watched videos, and I followed the instructions. These sentences are very useful when describing problem-solving activities at home or work. Last week, my friend Clara told me about a difficult conversation she had with her boss. Clara said, "I needed to ask for more time to finish a project." She explained, "At first, I felt nervous because I wasn't sure how he would react." Clara continued, "I politely explained the reasons and asked if an extension was possible." She added, "Fortunately, my boss understood and gave me 2 extra days." Clara's experience teaches useful expressions for work and communication. You might say, "I needed to ask for," "I felt nervous," "I politely explained," and "he understood." These phrases help you express requests and feelings clearly. My neighbor George recently started taking care of his health. He said, "I decided to exercise every morning." George explained, "At first it was hard to wake up early." He added, "I started with simple exercises like walking and stretching." George said, "After a few weeks, I felt stronger and had more energy." This story shows how to talk about new habits and changes. Use sentences like, "I decided to exercise. It was hard at first. I started with, and I felt stronger." These expressions are great for talking about health and lifestyle improvements. My sister Megan shared a funny story about a surprise visit. She said, "My husband and I planned a weekend trip." Megan explained, "We didn't tell anyone because it was a surprise." She added, "When we came back, our dog seemed very happy to see us." Megan said, "It was funny how the dog acted like we were gone for a long time." Megan's story helps you describe plans and emotions. You can say, "We planned a trip. We didn't tell anyone. Our dog seemed happy. And it was funny." These phrases make your stories more vivid and relatable. My friend Jason told me about his experience shopping for a new laptop. He said, "I researched different models for 2 weeks." Jason explained, "I read reviews and compared prices online." He added, "When I went to the store, I asked the salesperson many questions." Jason said, "Finally, I chose a laptop that fits my needs and budget." This story teaches useful phrases for shopping and decision-making. You might say, "I researched," "I read reviews." One evening, my Aunt Lucy told me about a cooking disaster she had. She said, "I tried a new recipe for a cake. Lucy explained, I mixed all the ingredients and put the cake in the oven. She added, after 30 minutes, I realized I forgot to add sugar. Lucy laughed and said, the cake was not sweet, but we still ate it. Lucy's story shows how to talk about mistakes in cooking or other activities. Use full sentences like, I tried a new recipe, I forgot to add, and the cake was not sweet. These phrases help you describe errors and humor in your stories. My colleague Peter shared a story about traveling abroad for the first time. He said, I went to France for a business trip. Peter explained, I was nervous because I don't speak French. He added, I use simple English and a translation app to communicate. Peter said, the people were friendly and I managed to get around easily. Peter's story teaches useful phrases for travel and communication. You can say, I went for a business trip, I was nervous, I used an app, and I managed to get around. These sentences help explain challenges and solutions during travel. My friend Sarah told me about learning to play the piano. She said, I started lessons last year. Sarah explained, it was difficult to learn the notes and timing. She added, I practiced every day for 30 minutes. Sarah said, now I can play a few songs and I enjoy it a lot. This story is great for talking about learning and practice. Use sentences like, I started lessons, it was difficult, I practiced every day, and I enjoy it. These expressions help describe progress and enjoyment in hobbies. A few days ago, my neighbor Adam shared a story about fixing his bicycle. He said, the chain came off while I was riding. Adam explained, I stopped and tried to put it back. He added, it took some time, but I fixed it and continued riding. Adam said, now I carry a small toolkit with me. Adam's story helps you talk about problems and solutions during activities. You might say, the chain came off. I tried to fix it. It took some time, and I carry a toolkit. These sentences are useful for describing unexpected problems and preparation. My friend Laura shared a story about her first day at a new school. She said, I was very nervous and didn't know anyone. Laura explained, I introduced myself to my classmates. She added, some of them were friendly and invited me to sit with them. Laura said, after a few days, I felt comfortable and made new friends. This story is useful for describing social situations and feelings. Use sentences like, I was nervous, I introduced myself, they invited me, and I felt comfortable. These phrases help you talk about new experiences and building relationships. My colleague Michael told me about a problem with his computer. He said, my laptop stopped working suddenly. Michael explained, I tried restarting it, but it didn't help. He added, I took it to a technician who fixed the problem. Michael said, now it works well and I back up my files regularly. Michael's story teaches how to describe technical problems and solutions. Use sentences like, it stopped working, I tried restarting, I took it to a technician, and I back up my files. These expressions help describe challenges and precautions. My friend Emma shared a story about a day she helped a stranger. She said, I saw an elderly woman struggling with her groceries. Emma explained, I offered to help carry the bags to her car. She added, she was very thankful and smiled warmly. Emma said, helping others makes me feel good. This story is great for talking about kindness and social interaction. Use sentences like, I saw someone struggling. I offered to help. She was thankful, and it makes me feel good. These phrases help you describe helpful actions and feelings. My neighbor David told me about a funny experience at a restaurant. He said, I ordered a dish I had never tried before. David explained, when the food arrived, it looked very different from what I expected. He added, I was nervous to taste it, but it was delicious. David said, I learned to try new things. David's story helps you talk about new experiences and feelings. Use sentences like, I ordered, it looked different, I was nervous, and it was delicious. These expressions help you describe surprises and open-mindedness. Few weeks ago, my friend Olivia told me about a concert she attended. She said, I went with some friends to see a live band. Olivia explained, the music was loud and energetic. She added, we danced and sang along to the songs. Olivia said, it was a memorable night. This story teaches vocabulary related to entertainment. You can say, I went to see, the music was loud, we danced, and it was memorable. These phrases help describe social events and enjoyment. My colleague James shared a story about buying a house. He said, we looked at many properties before deciding. James explained, it was important to find a house in a good neighborhood. He added, after a long search, we found the perfect home. James said, now we enjoy living there. James's story helps with phrases about searching and decisions. Use sentences like, we looked at, it was important, we found, and we enjoy living. These expressions are useful for describing important choices. My friend Rachel told me about her experience learning to drive. She said, I was nervous during my first driving lesson. Rachel explained, my instructor was patient and gave clear instructions. She added, with practice, I gained confidence. Rachel said, now I drive safely and enjoy it. This story is useful for describing feelings and learning progress. Use sentences like, I was nervous. The instructor was patient. I gained confidence. And I drive safely. These phrases help talk about learning new skills. Now it's your turn to think about your own stories. You can tell someone about a time you helped someone, learned something new, or experienced something unexpected. Use full sentences to describe what happened, how you felt, and what you learned. Practicing this will make your English more fluent and natural. Let me tell you about a recent story from my friend Alex. Alex works in an office, and last week he had an interesting experience. He said, I was preparing an important report for a client. Alex explained, I spent several days collecting data and writing the report. He continued, on the day I had to submit it, my computer suddenly crashed. Alex added, I panicked because I thought I lost everything. Fortunately, he had saved the file on the cloud, so he was able to access it from another computer. Alex said, I learned the importance of backing up my work regularly. From Alex's story, you can learn useful expressions such as, I preparing, I spent several days, my computer crashed, I panicked, and I had saved the file. These sentences help you explain work situations and how to handle unexpected problems calmly. A few days ago, my neighbor Grace told me about her experience at a supermarket. She said, I went shopping for groceries last weekend. Grace explained, the store was very crowded and I had to wait in long lines. She added, while waiting, I saw a child drop a toy. Grace continued, I picked it up and gave it back to the child, who smiled happily. She said, helping others, even in small ways, makes the day better. Grace's story is useful for talking about shopping and social interactions. You might say, I went shopping. The store was crowded. I had to wait. And I helped someone. These phrases make your stories more detailed and meaningful. Let me share a story from my colleague Robert, who recently learned how to use new software at work. He said, our company introduced a new program for managing projects. Robert explained, at first I found it confusing and difficult to use. He added, I spent time watching tutorials and practicing every day. Robert said, now I am comfortable with the software and can work faster. Robert's story teaches you how to describe learning processes and improvements. Use sentences like, I found it confusing, I spent time learning, I practiced, and I am comfortable. These phrases help talk about adapting to new tools and skills. My friend Emma told me about a weekend she spent volunteering. She said, I joined a group to clean up a local park. Emma explained, we collected trash, planted flowers, and painted benches. She added, it was hard work, but it felt good to help the community. Emma said, I made new friends and learned more about teamwork. Emma's story is great for talking about community service and cooperation. You can say, I joined a group. We collected trash. It was hard work, and I made friends. These expressions are useful for describing group activities and positive experiences. Last month, my cousin Mark shared a story about buying his first car. He said, I saved money for several years to buy a reliable car. Mark explained, I researched different models and visited several dealerships. He added, after careful consideration, I chose a car that fits my budget. Mark said, buying a car was a big decision, but I am very happy with it. Mark's story helps you talk about planning and making important purchases. Use sentences like, my sister Lily recently told me about her experience learning to bake bread. She said, I followed a recipe I found online. Lily explained, at first the dough didn't rise properly, and I was disappointed. She added, I realized I forgot to add yeast. Lily said, after trying again with the yeast, the bread turned out perfect. Lily's story is useful for describing cooking attempts and learning from mistakes. You can say, I followed a recipe, it didn't rise, I forgot an ingredient, and it turned out perfect. These phrases help you share successes and failures. My friend James told me about a time he got lost in a new city. He said, I was walking to a restaurant, but I took the wrong turn. James explained, I didn't have internet, so I asked a local for directions. He added, the person was very helpful and showed me the right way. James said, I arrived late, but I enjoyed the meal. James's story teaches phrases related to travel and asking for help. Use sentences like, I got lost, I took the wrong turn, I asked for directions, and I arrived late. These expressions help describe travel challenges and problem solving. A few days ago, my neighbor Hannah shared a story about a day at the beach. She said, I went to the beach with my family. Hannah explained, we played volleyball, swam in the sea, and had a picnic. She added, the weather was sunny and warm. Hannah said, it was a relaxing and fun day for everyone. Hannah's story helps describe leisure activities and weather. You can say, I went to the beach, we played volleyball, the weather was sunny, and it was relaxing. Myers, these sentences make your stories enjoyable and clear. My colleague Michael told me about a time he helped a friend move to a new apartment. He said, we packed boxes and loaded the furniture into a truck. Michael explained, it was tiring work, but we finished everything in one day. He added, after moving, we celebrated with dinner. Michael said, helping friends is important and rewarding. Michael's story is great for talking about physical tasks and friendship. Use sentences like, we packed boxes, it was tiring, we finished, and we celebrated. These phrases describe teamwork and support. My friend Olivia told me about her experience visiting a museum. She said, I saw many interesting paintings and sculptures. Olivia explained, the guide explained the history behind the artworks. She added, I learned a lot about different artists. Olivia said, it was a great way to spend the afternoon. Olivia's story helps you talk about cultural experiences. Use sentences like, I saw paintings, the guide explained, I learned a lot, and it was a great experience. These expressions help you describe educational activities. My neighbor Thomas shared a story about a hiking trip he took last summer. He said, the trail was long and sometimes difficult. Thomas explained, we stopped often to rest and enjoy the views. He added, at the top, the scenery was amazing. Thomas said, it was challenging, but the effort was worth it. Thomas's story teaches useful phrases about outdoor activities. You can say, the trail was long, we stopped to rest, the scenery was amazing, and it was worth it. These sentences help describe physical challenges and rewards. My friend Sarah told me about learning to play chess. She said, at first I didn't understand the rules. Sarah explained, I practiced with my brother and read a beginner's guide. She added, now I can play basic games and enjoy it. Sarah said, learning chess improved my thinking skills. Sarah's story is useful for discussing learning new games or skills. Use sentences like, I didn't understand, I practiced, I can play, and it improved my skills. These phrases help describe progress and benefits. My colleague David told me about attending a conference. He said, I listened to many speakers and took notes. David explained, The topics were related to technology and innovation. He added, I met new people and exchanged ideas. David said, the conference helped me grow professionally. David's story helps talk about professional development. You can say, I attended a conference, I took notes, I met new people, and it helped me. These phrases are useful when discussing work events. My friend Emily shared a story about decorating her home. She said, I bought new furniture and painted the walls. Emily explained, I chose light colors to make the rooms look bigger. She added, it took a few weeks, but the result was beautiful. Emily said, I feel happier in my new space. Emily's story is great for describing home improvements. Use sentences like, I bought furniture, I painted the walls, it took time, and I feel happier. These phrases help describe changes and feelings. My neighbor John told me about his experience learning a new language. He said, I started taking Spanish classes. John explained, it was challenging to learn grammar and pronunciation. He added, I practiced speaking with friends and used language apps. John said, now I can hold simple conversations. John's story teaches phrases related to language learning. Use sentences like, I started classes, it was challenging, I practiced speaking, and I can hold conversations. These expressions help describe progress and methods. My friend Laura told me about a memorable birthday party. She said, my friend surprised me with decorations and gifts. Laura explained, we played games, ate cake, and listened to music. She added, it was a joyful and unforgettable day. Laura said, I felt very loved and grateful. Laura's story helps talk about celebrations and emotions. Use sentences like, my friend surprised me, we played games, it was unforgettable, and I felt grateful. These phrases help express happiness and appreciation. Now it's your turn to practice telling your own stories. Think about moments when you faced a challenge, helped someone, or enjoyed a special event. Try to use full sentences to describe what happened, how you felt, and what you learned. This practice will improve your fluency and confidence in English. Let me tell you about my friend Ethan's recent experience with public transportation. Ethan said, last week, I decided to take the subway to work instead of driving. He explained, it was my first time using the subway system in this city. Ethan added, at first I was a little confused by the maps and the different lines. He continued, I asked a station worker for help and she kindly explained how to get to my stop. Ethan said, by the end of the week, I was comfortable using the subway and even saved time. From Ethan's story, you can learn how to express new experiences and asking for help. Phrases like, I decided to take, it was my first time, I was confused, and I asked for help are useful in daily life. These sentences teach you how to talk about learning something new and overcoming uncertainty. My cousin Natalie told me about a weekend she spent gardening. She said, I planted tomatoes and herbs in my backyard. Natalie explained, I spent the whole Saturday digging, planting, and watering. She added, it was hard work, but I enjoyed being outside in the fresh air. Natalie said, now I check on the plants every day and look forward to harvesting. This story helps you talk about hobbies and outdoor activities. Use sentences like I planted, I spent time. It was hard work, and I look forward to. These expressions help describe effort, routine, and anticipation. A few weeks ago, my friend Jack shared a story about attending a job interview. He said, "I was nervous before the interview." Jack explained, "I prepared answers to common questions and researched the company." He added, "During the interview, I listened carefully and answered honestly." Jack said, "Afterward, I felt proud of how I handled the situation." Jack's story teaches useful phrases for job interviews and self-confidence. You can say, "I was nervous, I prepared answers, I listened carefully, and I felt proud." These sentences help you describe important moments in your career. My neighbor Grace told me about a time she helped her elderly neighbor. She said she needed help carrying heavy groceries into her house. Grace explained, "I offered to help, and she was very grateful." She added, "We talked for a while, and I learned about her life." Grace said, "Helping others creates strong connections in the community." This story is great for talking about kindness and community. Use sentences like, "She needed help." "I offered to help." "She was grateful," and helping others creates connections. These phrases show social skills and positive actions. Let me share a story from my colleague Henry, who recently started jogging. He said, "I wanted to improve my health, so I started running every morning." Henry explained, "At first, I could only run for a few minutes before feeling tired." He added, "With daily practice, I increased my stamina." Henry said, "Now, I run 5 kilometers comfortably." Henry's story teaches how to talk about fitness goals and progress. Use sentences like, "I wanted to improve," "I started running," "I felt tired," and "I increased my stamina." These expressions help describe perseverance and success. My friend Sophia told me about a memorable concert she attended. She said, "The band played my favorite songs." Sophia explained, "The atmosphere was electric and everyone was dancing." She added, "I sang along with the crowd and had a great time." Sophia said, "It was one of the best nights I have ever had." Sophia's story helps you talk about entertainment and emotions. Use phrases like, "The band played," "The atmosphere was electric." Last month, my neighbor David shared his experience shopping for furniture. He said, "I needed a new desk for my home office." David explained, "I visited several stores and compared different options." He added, "I chose a desk that was sturdy and matched my style." David said, "Assembling it was challenging, but the result was worth it." David's story helps with vocabulary related to shopping and home. Use sentences like, "I needed," "I visited stores," "I chose," and "the result was worth it." These phrases describe decision-making and satisfaction. My friend Anna told me about a cooking class she took. She said, "I wanted to learn how to make pasta from scratch." Anna explained, "The instructor showed us how to prepare the dough and shape it." She added, "It was fun, and I practiced at home." Anna said, "Now I can cook pasta dishes for my family." Anna's story is useful for describing learning experiences. Use sentences like, "I wanted to learn," "The instructor showed," "It was fun," and "I can cook." These phrases help talk about new skills and hobbies. A few days ago, my colleague Paul told me about a time he repaired a leaking faucet. He said water was dripping all night. Paul explained, I watched a tutorial and bought the parts needed. He added, it took some effort, but I fixed it myself. Paul said, I felt satisfied saving money and doing the repair. Paul's story teaches phrases for home repairs and problem solving. Use sentences like water was dripping, I watched a tutorial, I fixed it, and I felt satisfied. These expressions help describe practical skills. My neighbor, Emily, shared a story about a family reunion. She said, all the relatives came to our house for a big dinner. Emily explained, we cooked together and shared stories from the past. She added, it was wonderful to see everyone and reconnect. Emily said, family gatherings bring happiness and memories. Emily's story helps talk about family and emotions. Use sentences like, all the relatives came, we cooked together, it was wonderful, and family gatherings bring happiness. These phrases describe connection and joy. My friend Liam told me about an important lesson he learned from traveling. He said, I visited a country where people spoke a different language. Liam explained, I realized how important it is to be patient and respectful. He added, using simple words and gestures helped me communicate. Liam said, traveling teaches you more than just sightseeing. Liam's story is useful for discussing cultural experiences. Use sentences like, I visited, I realized, I used simple words, and traveling teaches. These expressions show growth and understanding. Last weekend, my colleague Victoria told me about volunteering at an animal shelter. She said, I helped feed and clean the animals. Victoria explained, it was rewarding to care for them and see their gratitude. She added, volunteering gave me a new perspective on kindness. Victoria said, I plan to continue helping in the future. Victoria's story helps with vocabulary about volunteering and compassion. Use sentences like, I helped feed, it was rewarding, I saw gratitude, and I plan to continue. These phrases express empathy and commitment. My friend Nathan shared a story about organizing a surprise party. He said, we planned everything in secret for my wife's birthday. Nathan explained, we decorated the house and invited close friends. He added, when she arrived, she was shocked and very happy. Nathan said, the party was a great success. Nathan's story teaches phrases about planning and emotions. Use sentences like, we planned, we decorated, she was shocked, and it was a success. These expressions help describe celebrations. My neighbor Olivia told me about learning to swim. She said, I was afraid of the water for many years. Olivia explained, with patient lessons and support, I gained confidence. She added, now I can swim well and enjoy being in the pool. Olivia said, overcoming fear feels amazing. Olivia's story is great for talking about challenges and achievements. Use sentences like, I was afraid, I gained confidence, I can swim, and it feels amazing. These phrases describe personal growth. My friend Jacob told me about his experience using a fitness app. He said, I wanted to improve my exercise routine. Jacob explained, the app gave me daily workouts and tracked my progress. He added, I felt motivated seeing my improvements. Jacob said, technology can be a great tool for health. Jacob's story helps describe technology and motivation. Use sentences like, I wanted to improve, the app gave, I tracked progress, and I felt motivated. These expressions help talk about goals and tools. My colleague Sarah told me about learning to drive a car. She said, I was nervous at first, but my instructor was patient. Sarah explained, I practiced parking, turning, and driving in traffic. She added, after several lessons, I passed my driving test. Sarah said, now I enjoy the freedom of driving. Sarah's story teaches useful phrases for learning and success. Use sentences like, I was nervous, I practiced, I passed the test, and I enjoy driving. These expressions help describe achievements. My friend Michael shared a story about building a bookshelf. He said, I bought all the materials from the hardware store. Michael explained, I followed the instructions step by step. He added, it took a few hours, but the shelf was sturdy and beautiful. Michael said, building something yourself is very satisfying. Michael's story is great for talking about projects and pride. Use sentences like, I bought materials, I followed instructions, it took time, and it was satisfying. These phrases help describe effort and success. My neighbor Lily told me about a memorable trip to the mountains. She said, the air was fresh and the views were breathtaking. Lily explained, we hiked to a waterfall and had a picnic. She added, it was peaceful and relaxing away from the city. Lily said, nature has a way of refreshing the mind. Lily's story helps you talk about nature and relaxation. Use sentences like, the air was fresh, we hiked, it was peaceful, and nature refreshes. These expressions describe calm and beauty. My friend Daniel told me about organizing his home office. He said, I bought shelves and a new desk. Daniel explained, I sorted papers and put everything in order. He added, having a clean workspace helps me focus. Daniel said, now I enjoy working from home. Daniel's story is useful for talking about organization and productivity. Use sentences like, I bought shelves, I sorted papers, it helps me focus, and I enjoy working. These phrases describe habits and benefits. Now it's your turn. Think about your own experiences, learning something new, helping someone, or having fun. Tell these stories using full sentences and describe your feelings and what you learned. This will help you improve your English speaking and listening skills naturally. Keep practicing every day with real-life examples. The more you listen and speak, the easier English becomes. Soon, you will feel confident sharing your stories with anyone, anywhere. Let me share a story about my friend Rachel's recent experience learning to bake bread at home. She said, I wanted to try baking because I love fresh bread. but I had never done it before. Rachel explained, I started by watching online tutorials to understand the process. She added, the first time I baked, the bread was too dense and didn't rise well. Rachel said, I realized I had used the wrong kind of flour. After that, she tried again using bread flour, and the result was much better. Rachel said, I was proud when my bread was soft and fluffy. From Rachel's story, you can learn how to talk about trying new hobbies and learning from mistakes. Useful expressions include, I wanted to try, I started by watching, the bread was too dense, and I was proud. These sentences help you describe challenges and success in a detailed way. A few weeks ago, my colleague Stephen told me about his experience organizing a charity event. He said, our team decided to raise money for a local shelter. Stephen explained, we planned the event for several months and invited many people. He added, on the day of the event, we set up tables, decorations, and a stage for speakers. Stephen said, despite some unexpected problems, the event was a success. He also mentioned, it was rewarding to see how much we raised and how happy the shelter was. Stephen's story is useful for talking about teamwork, planning, and problem solving. You can say, our team decided, we planned for months, we set up, there were unexpected problems. My neighbor Anna shared an experience about starting a new fitness routine. She said, I wanted to be healthier and more active. Anna explained, I joined a yoga class near my home. She added, at first the poses were difficult, and I felt stiff. Anna said, but with regular practice, my flexibility improved. She also mentioned, now I feel more relaxed and energized after each session. Anna's story teaches you how to talk about physical activity and progress. Use phrases like, I wanted to be healthier, I joined a class, the poses were difficult, my flexibility improved, and I feel energized. These expressions are great for discussing fitness and well-being. Last month, my friend Oliver told me about an adventure he had while hiking. He said, I went on a trail that was longer than I expected. Oliver explained, halfway through, the weather suddenly changed and it started to rain. He added, I didn't have a raincoat, so I got very wet. Oliver said, despite the discomfort, the views were amazing. He also mentioned, I learned to check the weather forecast carefully next time. Oliver's story is useful for describing unexpected situations and lessons learned. Useful sentences like, I went on a trail, the weather changed, I didn't have a raincoat, the views were amazing, and I learned to check. These phrases help describe challenges and reflections. My friend Jessica told me about her experience starting a new job. She said, I was excited, but also nervous on my first day. Jessica explained, the team welcomed me warmly and showed me how to use the software. She added, I asked many questions because I wanted to learn quickly. Jessica said, by the end of the week, I felt more confident. Jessica's story teaches useful expressions for new beginnings and learning. Use sentences like, I was excited. They welcomed me. I asked questions. And I felt confident. These help describe emotions and adaptation in a new environment. My colleague Michael shared a story about fixing his car. He said, "One morning, the car wouldn't start." Michael explained, "I checked the battery and noticed it was dead." He added, "I called a friend who helped me jumpstart the car." Michael said, "I also learned how to check the battery and cables properly." Michael's story is useful for describing problems and solutions with everyday technology. Use phrases like, "The car wouldn't start," "I checked the battery," "I called a friend," and "I learned how to." These expressions help explain technical issues and help received. A few days ago, my neighbor Karen told me about a family celebration. She said, "We hosted a dinner party for my parents' anniversary." Karen explained, "I cooked their favorite dishes and decorated the house." She added, "Many relatives came, and we shared memories and laughter." Karen said, "It was a beautiful and emotional evening." Karen's story helps you talk about family events and emotions. Use sentences like, "We hosted a party," "I cooked dishes," "We shared memories," and "It was emotional." These phrases describe meaningful social occasions. My friend Liam told me about learning to play the guitar. He said, "I bought a guitar last year and started practicing." Liam explained, "At first my fingers hurt and I struggled with chords." He added, "I practiced every day for 20 minutes. Liam said, "Now I can play a few songs and I enjoy it." Liam's story is useful for discussing learning and persistence. Use sentences like, "I bought a guitar," "My fingers hurt," "I practiced every day," and "I enjoy it." These expressions help describe dedication and improvement. My neighbor Emily shared a story about her experience adopting a pet. She said, "I adopted a cat from a shelter." Emily explained, "The cat was shy at first but became more playful." She added, "Taking care of a pet teaches responsibility and patience." Emily said, "I love having a furry friend at home." Emily's story helps with vocabulary about pets and feelings. Use sentences like, "I adopted a cat," "The cat was shy," "Taking care teaches," and "I love having." These phrases describe relationships and care. My colleague David told me about attending a cooking workshop. He said, "I learned how to make sushi." David explained, "The instructor showed us step by step how to prepare the rice and roll the sushi." He added, "It was fun and challenging." David said, "Now I try making sushi at home with friends." David's story teaches phrases about learning and social activities. Use sentences like, "I learned how to," "The instructor showed," "It was fun," and "I try making." These help describe new experiences and enjoyment. Last weekend, my friend Sophie told me about visiting a historic site. She said, "I toured an old castle with my family." Sophie explained, "The guide told stories about the castle's history." She added, "I was amazed by the architecture and views." Sophie said, "It was a great educational trip." Sophie's story is useful for talking about travel and learning. Use sentences like, "I toured," "The guide told stories," "I was amazed," and "It was educational." These phrases help describe exploration and appreciation. My friend Jason shared a story about learning to swim. He said, "I was afraid of water when I was a child. Jason explained, with patient teachers, I gradually learned to swim. He added, now I swim regularly for exercise. Jason said, learning to swim gave me confidence. Jason's story helps. Describe overcoming fear and gaining skills. Use sentences like, I was afraid, I learned gradually, I swim regularly, and it gave me confidence. These expressions describe growth and achievement. My neighbor Olivia told me about attending a music festival. She said, there were many different bands and performers. Olivia explained, the crowd was enthusiastic and everyone was enjoying the music. She added, I danced and sang along all day. Olivia said, it was a memorable experience. Olivia's story is great for describing events and emotions. Use sentences like, there were many bands, the crowd was enthusiastic, I danced, and it was memorable. These phrases help describe excitement and fun. My colleague Henry shared a story about fixing a broken chair. He said, one leg of the chair was loose. Henry explained, I used glue and clamps to fix it. He added, it took some time, but the chair is sturdy now. Henry said, I enjoy doing small repairs around the house. Henry's story teaches practical vocabulary. Use sentences like, the leg was loose, I used glue, it took time, and I enjoy repairs. These phrases describe fixing and satisfaction. My friend Laura told me about a memorable road trip. She said, we drove across 3 states in 1 week. Laura explained, we stopped at many landmarks and tried local foods. She added, the best part was meeting new people along the way. Laura said, traveling broadens your horizons. Laura's story helps talk about travel and experiences. Use sentences like, we drove, we stopped, we tried foods, and traveling broadens. These phrases describe adventure and learning. My neighbor Michael shared a story about planting a tree. He said, I planted a maple tree in my garden. Michael explained, it took several hours to prepare the soil and dig the hole. He added, I water the tree regularly to help it grow. Michael said, watching the tree grow is very rewarding. Michael's story helps. You talk about nature and care. Use sentences like, I planted, I prepared the soil, I water regularly, and it is rewarding. These phrases describe patience and growth. My friend Sarah told me about her experience joining a book club. She said, we meet once a month to discuss a book. Sarah explained, it's a great way to practice English and share opinions. She added, I enjoy listening to different perspectives. Sarah said, the club helps me improve my language skills. Sarah's story is useful for discussing learning and social groups. Use sentences like, we meet, it's a great way, I enjoy listening, and it helps me. These expressions describe interaction and improvement. My colleague, Jack, told me about a camping trip. He said, we set up tents near a lake. Jack explained, at night we sat around a campfire and told stories. He added, sleeping in nature was peaceful, but also challenging. Jack said, I would love to go camping again. Jack's story helps describe outdoor activities and feelings. Use sentences like, we set up tents, we sat around a campfire, it was peaceful, and I would love. These phrases describe adventure and reflection. My friend Emma shared a story about learning photography. She said, I bought a camera and started taking pictures. Emma explained, at first, I didn't know how to use all the settings. She added, I took a course and practiced every weekend. Emma said, now I enjoy capturing special moments. Emma's story teaches how to describe hobbies and learning. Use sentences like, I bought a camera, I didn't know, I took a course, and I enjoy capturing. These phrases describe progress and joy. Now it's time for you to practice telling your own stories. Think about something new you tried, a problem you solved, or a fun experience. Use full sentences to describe what happened, how you felt, and what you learned. This will help you speak more fluently and confidently. Remember, the key to improving. English is regular practice with real life. I want to tell you about my friend Ethan's experience learning to cook for the first time. Ethan said, I decided to learn how to make a simple dinner because I was tired of eating fast food. He explained, I started with spaghetti because it seemed easy. Ethan added, I watched a cooking video and followed the steps carefully. He continued, the sauce was delicious, but I accidentally overcooked the pasta. Ethan said, even though it wasn't perfect, I was happy to prepare a meal myself. Ethan's story teaches you useful phrases for learning new skills and dealing with mistakes. You can say, I decided to learn, I started with, I followed the steps, and I was happy. These expressions help talk about trying new things and accepting small errors. Last summer, my colleague Mia shared her experience volunteering at a local library. She said, I helped organize books and assisted visitors. Mia explained, it was exciting to work with different people. She added, I learned how libraries operate and why reading is important. Mia said, volunteering made me feel connected to my community. Mia's story is good for talking about volunteering and community involvement. Use full sentences like, I helped organize, I assisted visitors, I learned how, and it made me feel. These sentences are helpful when discussing helpful activities. My neighbor James told me about fixing his bicycle after it broke down. He said, the chain fell off while I was riding. James explained, I didn't know how to fix it, so I watched a tutorial. He added, after some effort, I put the chain back and adjusted the brakes. James said, now I can ride confidently without worrying. James's story teaches practical vocabulary related to repairs and problem solving. You can say, the chain fell off, I watched a tutorial, I put it back, and I can ride confidently. These phrases are useful for explaining mechanical issues and solutions. A few months ago, my friend Claire shared her experience starting a garden on her balcony. She said, I planted flowers and small vegetables. Claire explained, it was challenging to keep the plants healthy. She added, I read about watering and sunlight requirements. Claire said, watching my garden grow gave me a lot of joy. Claire's story is useful for describing hobbies and learning about nature. Use full sentences like I planted, it was challenging, I read about, and it gave me joy. These phrases help express interest and care. My colleague, Peter, told me about a time he got lost in a big city. He said, I was trying to find a restaurant. Peter explained, the streets were confusing and signs were in a different language. He added, I used a map app and asked a friendly local for directions. Peter said, even though I was late, I enjoyed exploring the area. Peter's story helps talk about travel, challenges, and problem solving. Use sentences like, I was trying to find, the streets were confusing. I asked a local, and I enjoyed exploring. These expressions describe navigating new places. My friend Alice told me about learning to play the piano. She said, I started taking lessons last year. Alice explained, at first it was hard to read music. She added, I practiced scales every day and slowly improved. Alice said, playing music relaxes me and makes me happy. Alice's story is useful for describing learning and hobbies. Use full sentences like, I started taking lessons, it was hard, I practiced every day, and it makes me happy. These sentences help express progress and feelings. My neighbor Tom shared a story about organizing a birthday party for his daughter. He said, we invited family and friends. Tom explained, we decorated the house and prepared food. He added, the children played games and enjoyed the cake. Tom said, seeing everyone happy made me feel proud. Tom's story helps talk about events and emotions. Use sentences like, we invited, we decorated, they played games, and it made me feel proud. These expressions describe celebrations and joy. Last week, my colleague Nina told me about her experience buying a new phone. She said, I compared several models online. Nina explained, I read reviews and asked friends for advice. She added, I chose a phone with a good camera and battery life. Nina said, I am happy with my purchase. Nina's story teaches vocabulary related to shopping and decision-making. Use sentences like, I compared models, I read reviews, I chose, and I am happy. These phrases help explain making smart choices. My friend Robert told me about a time he went fishing for the first time. He said, I didn't know how to cast the line. Robert explained, a friend showed me the technique. He added, we waited patiently and caught a few fish. Robert said, it was relaxing and fun. Robert's story helps describe learning outdoor activities. Use full sentences like, I didn't know, a friend showed me, we waited patiently, and it was relaxing. These expressions are useful for talking about new experiences. My neighbor Linda shared a story about a family picnic. She said, we went to a park near the river. Linda explained, we brought sandwiches, fruits, and drinks. She added, the children played on the grass while adults talked. Linda said, it was a peaceful and enjoyable afternoon. Linda's story is great for describing outdoor activities and family time. Use sentences like, we went, we brought, they played, and it was enjoyable. These phrases help describe relaxation and togetherness. My colleague Simon told me about a time he helped a friend move to a new apartment. He said, "We packed boxes and carried furniture." Simon explained, "It was hard work, but teamwork made it easier." He added, "After moving, we ordered pizza and rested." Simon said, "Helping friends feels rewarding." Simon's story teaches phrases about cooperation and effort. Use full sentences like, "We packed boxes," "It was hard work," "We ordered pizza," and "It feels rewarding." These expressions describe collaboration and satisfaction. My friend Karen shared a story about her experience learning to drive. She said, "I took driving lessons for 3 months." Karen explained, "At first I struggled with parking and reversing." She added, "With practice and patience, I passed my driving test." Karen said, "Now I enjoy the freedom of driving." Karen's story helps describe learning challenges and success. Use sentences like, "I took lessons," "I struggled," "I passed the test," and "I enjoy." These phrases describe persistence and achievement. A few months ago, my neighbor Jake told me about attending a cooking class. He said, "I learned how to make traditional dishes." Jake explained, "The chef demonstrated techniques step by step." He added, "Cooking with others made the experience enjoyable." Jake said, "I now cook more at home." Jake's story is useful for talking about classes and social activities. Use sentences like, "I learned," "The chef demonstrated," "It was enjoyable," and "I cook more." These expressions describe learning and fun. My friend Sophie told me about a visit to a museum. She said, "I saw ancient artifacts and paintings." Sophie explained, "The exhibits were well organized and informative." She added, "I especially liked the section on local history." Sophie said, "It was a fascinating experience." Sophie's story helps describe cultural visits and impressions. Use full sentences like, "I saw," "The exhibits were," "I liked," and "It was fascinating." These phrases describe interest and learning. My colleague Daniel shared a story about building a computer. He said, "I bought parts online and assembled them." Daniel explained, "I followed a guide and watched tutorial videos." He added, "It took time, but I built a fast computer." Daniel said, "Doing it myself gave me confidence." Daniel's story teaches vocabulary related to technology and DIY projects. Use sentences like, "I bought parts," "I followed a guide," "It took time," and "It gave me confidence." These expressions describe effort and pride. My neighbor Emily told me about an experience planting flowers for the first time. She said, "I chose colorful tulips and daisies." Emily explained, "I prepared the soil and planted the bulbs." She added, "Watering regularly helped them grow." Emily said, "Watching the flowers bloom was very satisfying." Emily's story is great for describing gardening and nature. Use sentences like, "I chose," "I prepared," "I watered," and "It was satisfying." These phrases describe care and enjoyment. My friend Matt shared a story about attending a sports game. He said, I watched a soccer match with friends. Matt explained, the stadium was full of cheering fans. He added, the game was exciting and close. Matt said, I enjoyed the atmosphere and company. Matt's story helps talk about sports and social events. Use sentences like, I watched, the stadium was full, the game was exciting, and I enjoyed. These expressions describe fun and excitement. My colleague Lisa told me about learning how to use a new software program at work. She said, the program helps manage projects efficiently. Lisa explained, I attended a training session to learn its features. She added, practice helped me use it confidently. Lisa said, now I complete tasks faster. Lisa's story teaches workplace vocabulary and learning. Use sentences like, the program helps, I attended training, practice helped me, and I complete tasks. These expressions describe improvement and productivity. My neighbor Jack shared a story about a camping trip with his family. He said, we stayed in